It started in the middle of a storm, the kind that drowns out the sound of everything but your own heartbeat and the biting slap of cold rain on bare skin. New York was drowning that night, not just in water, but in noise, in chaos, in indifference. The streets pulsed with the movement of people trying not to be seen, not to feel, not to stop. Umbrellas bent and broke in the wind, taxis honked like angry birds in a concrete nest, and somewhere under the rhythmic thudding of rain on roofs, a man sat hunched beneath a scaffold made of rust and desperation. He had no blanket, no gloves, no shoes worth mentioning. Just a pair of threadbare sneakers patched with duct tape and the faint warmth of a garbage bag wrapped around his chest like armor. His name was Elijah Cartwright, but no one had called him that in years. To most, he was just that guy by 43rd and 9th, the one with the tired eyes and the broken watch that he still checked, even though it hadn't ticked since 2018. He knew the time anyway. You learn to tell it by the way shadows fall on buildings when you sleep on sidewalks. Elijah hadn't always been this way. He used to wear tailored suits and Italian shoes, the kind that made no noise on marble floors. He used to sit behind an obsidian desk on the 27th floor of a building not far from where he now crouched for shelter. Used to close deals worth millions while sipping espresso in silence, never spilling a drop. But life doesn't fall apart all at once. It unravels. Slowly. Painfully. One thread at a time. His unraveling began with a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. His wife had been in a car accident. A drunk driver. She never came home. Elijah didn't go back to work the next day or the next week. He drank instead, but not to forget, to remember her laugh more clearly. The bills piled up. The company moved on, the friends got quieter, the apartment was taken, and then he found himself out here, learning how to count the seconds between, subway rumbles beneath the pavement, and how to tell if someone's going to hit you or ignore you when they walk past. That night, as the sky split open in forks of lightning and the city lights shimmered in the river like ghosts dancing in the dark, Elijah saw it, a wallet. It didn't belong in that place, not at that hour. It sat almost perfectly aligned with the curb, black leather, sleek, unscuffed, and slightly open. Rain was pooling around it, threatening to drag it into the gutter and into the storm drain forever. Elijah didn't move for a moment. He stared at it, frozen. It could have been a trap. People played cruel games sometimes, dropped something expensive looking and laugh when a desperate man chased it. But there was no laughter in the air, just thunder. He reached for it. His hands were shaking, not from fear but from hunger and cold. He picked it up gently, almost reverently, as if it were a wounded bird. The leather was smooth, like silk frozen in time. Inside, 5 crisp $100 bills. An engraved black titanium card, Nathaniel R. Ames. Several other cards, driver's license, corporate ID for Ames Global Holdings, and a slip of paper with a handwritten quote, "Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching." Elijah stared at the quote for a long time. It felt like the universe was laughing at him. He zipped the wallet into the inner pocket of his duffel bag, the only safe place he had, and didn't sleep that night. Not really. His eyes stayed open until the gray light of dawn began peeling away the shadows from the buildings. His stomach growled with a fury that felt personal, but he ignored it. He walked 10 blocks before he saw the first bagel cart. The scent of sesame and egg and cheap coffee swirled into his brain like a drug. He could have bought a feast with the money in that wallet. He could have eaten for a week, but he walked past it. Another 8 blocks later, his feet numb, he saw the Ames Tower. It rose like an obsidian dagger into the clouds, 47 floors of steel and glass and wealth so thick you could smell it. Elijah stepped toward the front doors. A man in a uniform stopped him immediately. "No panhandling, move along!" "I'm not here for money," Elijah said, voice raspy from days without speaking. "I found this. I think it belongs to Mr. Ames." The guard took the wallet suspiciously, flipping. It opened with gloves. His eyes widened slightly, but his face remained blank. He spoke into his collar, radioing something Elijah couldn't hear. Another man came, this one in a black suit, taller, meaner, and twice as suspicious. "Where'd you get this?" "Sidewalk, near 43rd. "You take anything out of it?" "No." They looked him up and down. Then they told him to wait. He didn't. He turned and walked away. He had done what needed to be done. He didn't want a thank you. Didn't expect one. He walked until his feet blistered, then curled into the corner of a shelter's foyer. It wasn't warm, but it was dry. That was yesterday. Today, everything changed. He was woken by a man in a long coat. Italian wool, sharp lines, the kind of coat you didn't buy but were born into. The man handed him a folder. No expression. No words. Just a nod and a gesture that said, "Open it." Inside, a check for $10,000. Below it, a letter. Just 3 words. "For your honor." Signed, Nathaniel R. Ames. Elijah dropped the folder. The check fluttered like a feather in the air, landing softly in his lap. He stared at it, blinked, tried to swallow, but his throat felt like it had turned to sand. He picked up the paper again, hands trembling violently now. Not fake, not some scam. A bank logo, a number, a contact. He didn't cry. Not yet. That came later. First came the silence, the deafening kind, the kind that happens when the universe answers you back after years of screaming into it. Later that day, Elijah was escorted by a silent driver in a black SUV to a private office in a building he hadn't been allowed to enter in 6 years. A woman in a cream blouse told him, "Mr. Ames has already set up a tax shelter and a legal team for you. He said, and I quote, 'Let him do what he wants. He's earned every penny.'" Elijah didn't know what to say. Not then, not yet. But what he did next, with that money, with that moment, would ripple through lives far beyond his own. And in the eyes of a billionaire, a homeless man's act of integrity had rewritten the value of wealth itself. The money didn't hit all at once, not in the way people imagine it, not like a rain of gold coins falling from the sky, or a truck pulling up with suitcases of cash. No. The first wave came in quiet, in the cold click of a pen signing the trust paperwork, in the respectful nods of the lawyers who suddenly looked at him not like a ghost, but like a man. The bank confirmed the deposit. Elijah's name now sat beside 8 zeros. He couldn't stop staring at it. In his mind, he was still the man counting change for a pack of crackers at a 24-hour bodega. He still had holes in his socks, blisters on his feet. His coat still smelled of city rain and sleeping bags. But something was different now. They gave him a suite at the Park Meridian on Central Park South. He stood in the doorway for a full 5 minutes before stepping inside, afraid his shoes would dirty the carpet. The room was all beige and gold, soft lights, clean edges, crisp white linens. A fruit basket waited on the desk like a smile. He didn't touch anything at first, not even the bed. He sat on the floor by the window and watched the trees outside, the wind shaking them gently, like the city was whispering, "See what can happen when you don't stop believing?" The TV remote had dust on it the next morning. The minibar untouched, but the phone had one message blinking. A voicemail. He pressed play. It was him. "Nathaniel Ames." "Mr. Cartwright," the voice said. Steady, low, kind. "You didn't ask for anything, and that's exactly why you deserve everything. I built a world where people only do right when someone's watching, but you reminded me what real honor looks like. I hope this money gives you not just comfort, but power, the power to decide what happens next." Click. End of message. Elijah sat there, phone in hand, heart pounding. He whispered, "What happens next?" And then he started to move. The first thing he did was buy socks, 4-packs, cotton, white, from a drugstore on the corner, same place he used to loiter near. The cashier didn't recognize him, just rang them up like any other customer. He paid in cash, kept the receipt. The second thing he did was walk back to 43rd and 9th, to the scaffold. It was still there, his corner of the world, still damp, still forgotten. A man was sitting there now, young, maybe 30, shivering, lips blue. Elijah. Took off his new coat, handed it over. The man stared. Didn't say anything. Elijah just nodded. "Take it. You'll need it more than I do." He came back the next day, and the day after. By the end of the week, Elijah had bought a brownstone in Harlem. Not for himself, but for people like him, people with nowhere to go. He hired caseworkers, therapists, a full-time chef. Each room had clean beds, showers, and a notebook with the words, "Your story isn't over," printed on the first page. He called it the Honor House. He funded 3 more by the end of the year. But money alone doesn't heal a man. Elijah still flinched when someone raised their voice. Still turned his head when someone called, "Hey, homeless guy," forgetting for a second that wasn't him anymore. Still stood too long on subway platforms staring into the dark. One day, he walked into a barber shop on 145th. The man at the counter looked up, paused. "Sir, I think you're the guy from the news, right? That billionaire reward story?" Elijah didn't answer, just smiled gently. The man offered the cut for free. Elijah paid triple. The news had started to spread, slowly at first, like a whisper among stockbrokers and bankers in hushed halls. Then louder, through blog posts, social media reels, TikToks. Homeless man gets $10 million for returning lost wallet. Some thought it was a hoax. Others tried to fake their own versions of the story, dropping wallets near rich neighborhoods and staging videos. But the truth was quieter. Elijah had no social media, no interviews, no press statements. When CNN sent a crew to his brownstone and knocked, a small boy answered and said, "Mr. Eli's not home. He's probably buying more blankets again." Because he was. He bought 7 pallets of sleeping bags that winter, had them driven to shelters across 5 boroughs, hired drivers who'd once been homeless themselves, offered them training, helped them open checking accounts. He didn't spend $1 on designer clothes, didn't touch yachts or penthouses. But he did buy a building on the Upper East Side, the very one he used to clean toilets in before he was evicted. He restored it, opened an art studio on the bottom floor, and put out a sign. "Everyone has something beautiful to make." He taught, drawing to kids after school. One girl, maybe 9, looked up at him one day, charcoal on her cheeks, and said, "Are you famous?" And he said, "No, sweetheart. I'm just lucky enough to be seen." That night, he returned to the hotel. He still hadn't moved out. The suite had become more than a place. It had become a witness to his second life. There was a letter on the table. Heavy envelope, golden seal, from the office of Nathaniel Ames. He opened it carefully. Inside, a handwritten invitation. "Mr. Cartwright, you may not think of yourself as a leader, but I do. I'm launching a new initiative, the Honor Fund. I'd like you to sit on the board, not as an advisor, not as a symbol, but as a decision maker. The first man to make a fortune by giving everything away before touching a cent of it. Let's change the way the world defines worth. Together." Elijah folded the letter and placed it over his heart. He didn't cry, but he smiled. Because for the first time in 6 years, he didn't feel like a mistake. He felt like a chapter that had just begun. When the sun rose on that particular morning, a soft, honeyed light soaking the city skyline. Elijah Cartwright wasn't watching it from a street corner, wrapped in newspapers, fighting the cold. He wasn't peering through a coffee shop window hoping someone would leave behind half a bagel. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was staring out across the East River, 12 floors above the city, sipping tea from a ceramic mug someone had handmade just for him. A gift from one of the girls at the art center. She'd painted the words "Still Here" on the side, and every time he looked at it, he remembered the days when that phrase felt more like a burden than a blessing. He wasn't rich. Not in his bones. Money still made him flinch. He still apologized for spending anything. He still whispered thank you to vending machines out of habit. But now every dollar was an instrument, not of indulgence, but of change. Nathaniel Ames had given him a fortune. Elijah had turned it into something louder than money: purpose. After accepting the invitation to join the Honor Fund board, he found himself at long tables in glass offices, surrounded by people who had grown up with things he'd only ever seen on TV. But they listened when he spoke. They didn't interrupt. They didn't correct his grammar. Because every sentence that came out of his mouth carried weight that couldn't be learned in Ivy League classrooms or harvested in hedge funds. He had lived what most of them had only heard about. And it made his words heavy, real. When they asked what he thought should be the fund's first major project, he didn't hesitate. "Dignity," he said calmly, looking around at men in Rolexes and women with leather-bound tablets. "We rebuild dignity." And so they did. They bought up abandoned motels in the Midwest and converted them into job training centers. They partnered with former convicts who had turned their lives around and funded their outreach programs. They created mobile clinics that traveled state lines, dental care, mental health evaluations, hot showers. Places where no one asked you why you were broken, just handed you glue. Elijah didn't sit in a room giving orders. He rode on those buses. He helped paint the walls. He still wiped tables and swept up crumbs after children ate. No press cameras, no applause, just hands, work, sweat. But the world couldn't ignore him forever. A clip surfaced online, one someone had secretly taken, of Elijah kneeling beside an old veteran in a wheelchair, tying the man's shoe with care. In the background was a sign that read, "You Matter." The video went viral. Millions of views. Then came the interviews, the speaking invitations, the TED Talks, the profiles in Time and Forbes. But he always said no to the red carpets. Until the email from the Journal of Global Philanthropy arrived, inviting him to the International Humanitarian Awards Gala in Geneva. They were naming him Man of the Year. He thought about deleting it. But then he remembered something Nathaniel Ames had told him over lunch one quiet Sunday. Sometimes letting the world hear your story isn't vanity. It's a beacon. It's a flare for someone else lost in the dark. So he accepted. And on the night of the gala, he walked through marble doors in a charcoal suit stitched by hand, standing taller than he ever had in his life. He had never worn cufflinks before. They felt heavy like anchors or medals. People clapped when he took the stage. But he didn't bask. He didn't bow. He simply held up a photo, a faded, weather-warped photo, of himself 6 years ago. Leaning against a scaffolding, face hollow, eyes lost. A man who had nothing and no one. "This," he said into the microphone, "is what honor looks like. Before the world sees it." The room fell silent. "I didn't return that wallet because I expected anything. I did it because I couldn't be the man who didn't. And now I know that integrity isn't a currency. It's a compass. And the truth is, there are thousands, no, millions of people out there just like I was. Good people. Kind people. Forgotten people. But they don't need rescuing. They need restoring. They need one chance to be seen. That's all. Just one." The standing ovation lasted longer than his speech, But something strange happened after the ceremony. When he returned to his hotel, a letter was waiting, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, a park bench, a wallet, lying on it. On the back, in ink, were the words, "Because you reminded me how. N." Elijah didn't need to ask who it was from. He smiled, folded the photo, placed it in the inner pocket of his coat, the same pocket where he'd kept Nathaniel's wallet years ago. He took a breath, let it out slow, and then he reached for the small black notebook he always carried now, the one he gave to every resident of Honor House. On the first page, in bold letters, it read, "Your story isn't over." He turned to a fresh page and started writing again, not just his story, but the story of a world rediscovering kindness, one wallet at a time. It had been nearly 2 years since Elijah Cartwright picked up a wallet from a rain-soaked sidewalk, and yet every heartbeat in his chest still echoed back to that moment like a whispered legend retold each night before sleep. 2 years since. The world remembered that character could still outshine currency. 2 years since a man with nothing gave back everything, and was given something he never asked for, a second chance. And now, that second chance had changed hundreds of lives, thousands, maybe more. The Honor Fund had grown into something colossal, a name people no longer whispered in charity circles. Now they spoke it on stages, in boardrooms, on political floors. Elijah had been offered everything: Senate campaigns, book deals, documentary interviews, corporate seats, honorary degrees from places that once wouldn't have let him clean their bathrooms. But he had turned them down, every single one, because Elijah wasn't interested in fame. He was interested in impact, and yet something still gnawed at him in quiet hours. He hadn't returned home, not once, not to the street he'd grown up on, not to the small house in upstate New York that still existed somewhere beyond maps and memory, abandoned and broken. He hadn't seen it since the day after his wife's funeral, the day he left without locking the door, without packing a bag, without even looking back. But now, standing at the edge of a field that used to be his backyard, Elijah could smell something old and familiar rising with the mist. Pine, smoke, cold soil. The house had been taken by time. Ivy curling into the windows, paint peeled away to raw wood, roof slouched like a tired man ready to give in. But it was still there, like it had been waiting. He stepped inside slowly, his shoes crunching on shattered glass and years of silence. The kitchen tiles were chipped, the light fixtures were rusted. But on the windowsill, untouched and somehow still intact, was a tiny ceramic sparrow, the one his wife had made in a pottery class before they married. He picked it up, cradled it, let the memories wash over him like a second rain. He wept, for the first time in years, and when he came back to the city, he did something no one expected. He sold everything: the suite, the trust, the cars he never drove, the art someone had gifted him. He took the entirety of what remained, $7.2 million, and did the unimaginable. He gave it away, not in secret, not in shame, but publicly, purposefully. At a massive press conference standing in front of the Honor House headquarters, Elijah Cartwright stood in jeans and a faded sweatshirt and handed out envelopes to every member of his team, his staff, his partners, the janitor, the cooks, the volunteers, envelopes with checks, some for $10,000, some for $100,000, some for more. One reporter, confused and overwhelmed, called out, "Why now? Why everything?" And Elijah smiled, gently, eyes shining with the kind of peace that can't be bought. "I never needed millions to be whole. I just needed one person to see me. Mr. Ames gave me that. I've been spending the money ever since, trying to give that same gift to others. Now it's time for me to disappear. Because honor isn't about being remembered. It's about remembering yourself, even when the world forgets you." Then he handed the deed of the entire Honor Fund, the buildings, the accounts, the brand itself, to a single mother who used to sleep on the benches at the 7th Street shelter. She had gone through every program Elijah had created, had earned 2 degrees, had raised her son, had never missed a single shift. Her name was Jamie, and when Elijah said, "It's yours now," she collapsed into his arms. He disappeared the next morning. No one knew where he went. Some said he moved back to the woods. Others said he traveled to the border to help refugees. Some whispered he changed his name and lived among those he once saved, serving soup and stories. Others believed he died in peace somewhere quiet. But then the letters started showing up. Not from him, but about him. Letters written by people across the country and the world who had found wallets, literal wallets, on sidewalks, in airports, in train stations. Each one returned, every single one with a note inside. Do the right thing. Not because someone is watching, but because someone once did it for me. Signed, EC. It became a movement, for your honor, a pledge, a tattoo, a philosophy, a call to integrity in an age where cameras catch everything, but kindness still goes unseen. Years later, a young girl walked into the glass tower of Ames Global Holdings, clutching a worn envelope in her hand. She was maybe 9, hair braided, shoes too big. She handed the envelope to the receptionist and said, "My brother found this. My mama said we should return it." The receptionist opened it. Inside was a black card, a billionaire's wallet, and a note written in shaky pencil. Because of the story my mom tells us every night before bed. Nathaniel Ames, now older, grayer, still running his empire but with softer eyes, came down personally to greet the girl. He knelt, smiled, and asked gently, "What's your name?" She answered, and he said, "Your family's story just became part of something sacred." That night, Mr. Ames opened the small journal he kept hidden in his office drawer, the one titled Elijah. Inside were decades of stories, snapshots, clippings, notes, thousands of moments sparked by one act of selflessness. And on the last page, written in pen so worn it had nearly faded, was the original note. "For your honor, the city never built a statue for Elijah Cartwright, but his name, it lived, not in stone, not in headlines, but in every quiet moment when someone chose to do good, even when no one was looking, because sometimes the richest man in the world is the one who remembers what it means to be poor and gives away everything to make sure no one else is forgotten."
The wind howled between